Hi, and welcome to Scrum event session. In this session, we are going to study different Scrum events like daily Scrum, sprint planning, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. And we will also understand what is sprint. Yeah, so let us get started. Here we can see the sprint is a time boxed duration or iteration. That means it is an iteration in Scrum, because in Scrum we carry out work in iterative manner, and each of the iteration is known as a sprint, and this iteration it lasts for 1 to 4 weeks, and sprint length has to remain constant throughout your project life cycle, which means in the initial stage developers have to judge and decide like what should be the length of their sprint, and they have to execute one or two sprints, and they have to understand and figure out what would be the ideal length of the sprint for their project and how much they will be able to deliver in each of the sprint depending on their capacity and their velocity, the velocity of the sprint. Yeah, so this is all about the sprint or time boxed duration or iteration in Scrum. Now let us study different events in Scrum. The first event that we are going to study is daily Scrum. Daily Scrum is a meeting which is conducted on a daily basis. This is a 15-minute time boxed event. It cannot go beyond 15 minutes. Within that 15 minutes, the developers, the Scrum Master, they have to come together and they have to discuss like what has been accomplished and what they are planning to do the next day or that day, and what impediments they are going with. And this was the typical format earlier. That is, the format of daily Scrum was, it was a 3-question format in which each of the developer has to mention what they have accomplished yesterday and what they are planning to do today and what are the challenges or impediments they are facing. So this was a typical format, but in the latest Scrum Guide release, the team has mentioned that the format of daily Scrum is not prescriptive anymore, and the team can decide the format for their daily Scrum, like how it suits them, like what all questions they want to address in the daily Scrum, as long as it meets their goal. And it is held at the same time and same place each day. And participants for this meeting are Scrum Master and development team. Product owner might also be part of this meeting, but he cannot interfere in what development team is planning from their work perspective. This is all about daily Scrum. The second event in Scrum is sprint planning. Sprint planning is conducted at the start of each sprint, and the duration of this meeting is around 2 hours for 1 week sprint, and it is 4 hours for 2 week sprint, and so on. Participants would be the team or the developers, Scrum Master, and product owner. And so here, what is the actual activity that developers carry out in this meeting is, the developers, they break down the user stories into tasks, and estimation is also carried out as part of sprint planning meeting, and they form a sprint goal. And what is sprint goal? It is an objective set for that sprint. And example for sprint goal can be get payment feature ready in a financial application if you are working on a financial application. So this is about sprint goal. You have to come up with a sprint goal in sprint planning meeting. And you also need to address definition of ready, definition of done, and we also need to address 3 questions in sprint planning. First, let us look at what is definition of ready. Definition of ready is a set of criteria or checklist which tells you whether a particular user story is ready to be developed in that sprint or not. And this criteria is used at the start, that is before starting developing the user story. And definition of done is also a set of criteria or checklist, and this criteria is used after building the user story to verify whether you can call that user story as a ready item. So definition of done is a shared understanding of the team, that is shared understanding of what it means for the work to be completed. Like when can you call a particular user story as a completed user story. So this is the checklist. And definition of done or definition of ready, they can have both product criteria and project criteria. So we can look at some of the examples which can be part of the checklist. For example, increment has to meet agreed engineering standards, and whether the increment passes sonar cube checks with no critical errors. So these are the few of the examples which can be part of your definition of done or definition of ready. And there are mainly 3 questions we need to address as part of sprint planning meeting. So the first question is, why is this sprint valuable? And second question is, or second topic is, what can be done this sprint? And third is, how you are going to do that work. So the first topic is addressed by product owner. Product owner helps the developers and scrum master understand what all valuable items we can consume in this sprint, and we will be able to deliver more and more value to the customer as early as possible. And that is how they define the sprint goal, and they also finalize the sprint goal as part of sprint planning meeting. The second topic that is addressed in this meeting is what can be done in this sprint. So this what addresses the number of user stories that you are going to develop, and the developers are going to forecast like how much they will be able to develop in this sprint depending on their past performance and their experience. Third topic is, how will the chosen work get done? So developers have to come up with a strategy how they are going to build that particular increment in the sprint. Developers might choose to decompose the user stories into smaller items or tasks, and they might also come up with what is the work that is necessary to be carried out for completing this increment. And here we can understand what actually is the sprint backlog. Sprint backlog is a document which consists of sprint goal, selected product backlog items, and plan for the current sprint. So these are the different topics that we need to discuss as part of sprint planning meeting. Now let us move ahead with the third event in Scrum, that is sprint review. Sprint review is conducted at the end of each sprint, and the duration of this meeting is 2 hours for 1 week sprint, 4 hours for 2 week sprint, and so on. So the participants in sprint review are developers, scrum master, and product owner. They may also involve customer as part of this meeting if needed. And in this meeting, the sprint outcome is inspected and future adaptations are planned. So they are basically going to review the increment that is constructed as part of that sprint. And this meeting should not be a mere presentation kind of meeting, and actually the stakeholders, the developers, scrum master, product owner, they have to inspect the product by testing it, by inspecting it, by reviewing it, whether it is able to provide the required functionality or not. So this is the essence of sprint review meeting, which is conducted at the end of each sprint. Now let us study the fourth event, that is sprint retrospective. Sprint retrospective meeting is conducted after sprint review, at the end of each sprint, and the duration of this meeting is 3 hours for 4-week sprint. So approximately you have to spend 3 hours for a 4-week sprint, and it would be less for 1 or 2-week sprint. So in this meeting, what actually we are going to do is we are going to discuss what went well during this sprint, what went wrong or what problems we have encountered, and how can we address those problems, or how can we find out a permanent solution for those problems. And so the purpose of this meeting is for improving the processes, or improving the interactions, or improving the way of working. So here, how do we carry out the inspection? Here, last sprint is inspected with regard to individuals. Individuals, in the sense, there may be a possibility that your current team might not be able to deliver at a required capacity. So you might have to add one more developer in the team. So that could be one of the change you might have to make, looking at the current pace and current performance of the team. Interactions, if the communications are not happening effectively within the team or with the stakeholders, then the team has to come up with some recommendations, some improvements with regard to interactions and communications. And the same is the case with processes and even the definition of done. If your current definition of done or the checklist is not sufficient or not effectively inspecting the items before you call them done, as indicated in the definition of done, so this is how you can even update definition of done as part of sprint retrospective meeting. So basically, definition of done checklist is created, generally it is created in the first sprint planning meeting, and depending on the requirement or as per the need, it will be updated subsequently as part of sprint retrospectives. Like if you need, there should be one more condition in the checklist, or one more stuff you need to add, or you need to update an existing criteria, then you can do that as part of sprint retrospectives. So these all events are mandatory from Scrum perspective, and we need to practice these all events in a disciplined manner. We have to conduct daily Scrum on a daily basis, sprint planning at the start of each sprint, sprint review and retrospective at the end of each sprint. So this is how we are going to deliver value, because these are the proven practices. That is the reason it is prescribed that if you have this kind of format for your project, then you will be able to deliver your product successfully within the project constraints. Yeah. So this is all about Scrum events. Now, in the upcoming session, we are going to study a complete Scrum cycle. Yeah. Bye till then.